Along the quiet waterways of Illinois, where canals once carried commerce and hope through the heart of the land. There are old lock quarters that time forgot. During the day, they sit silently beside slow-moving water. But at night, the canals change. Water begins to move when there is no current. Chains rattle without being touched. Lights flicker inside buildings that have no power. Lock keepers once lived here, guarding the gates that raised and lowered boats. Some worked alone for months. Some never left at all. Locals say the canals remember every voice, every accident, every body that slipped beneath the dark water. And when the fog rolls in, the lock quarters wake up. Tonight, we drift slowly along forgotten waterways. Past crumbling stone walls and rusted iron gates. To explore the most haunted canal lock quarters in Illinois. Places where the water listens. And where something still waits inside the keeper's rooms. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly happy you are here with me tonight. I hope you are somewhere comfortable and safe, because the places we are about to visit are cold, damp, and filled with echoes of the past. Illinois is known for its rivers and canals. Long before highways and railroads, these waterways were lifelines. Canal lock keepers lived beside the water, operating massive gates day and night. Their quarters were small, isolated, and often surrounded by nothing but darkness and flowing water. Many lock keepers witnessed terrible accidents. Crushed boats. Drownings. Bodies trapped between rising gates. Some died in their sleep. Some vanished during storms. Some were found floating near the locks they once guarded. When the canals were abandoned, the keepers left. But not all of them moved on. Visitors today report footsteps on wet stone. Voices calling from inside empty rooms. And shadows moving along canal paths late at night. Before we step onto the towpath, let me ask you something. If you were walking beside a canal at night and heard someone calling for help from the water, but saw no one there, would you follow the sound or keep walking without looking back? Now slow your breathing. Listen to the water. And let us begin our journey through the haunted canal lock quarters of Illinois. Blackwater Lock House stands alone beside a stretch of canal water so dark it reflects nothing at all. By day, the surface appears flat and empty, absorbing light instead of returning it. Trees along the bank lean inward, their shadows disappearing the moment they touch the water. Even under bright sun, the canal looks unfinished, as if depth itself has been removed. The lock house was built close to the edge, its stone foundation set deep into damp ground. Time has softened its lines. Mortar crumbles at the corners. Wood along the doorframe has swollen and split. Inside, the rooms are small and plain, designed for function rather than comfort. From the windows, the canal lies only a few steps away, always present, always silent. During the day, nothing moves. The water remains still even when boats pass elsewhere along the system. Leaves that fall onto its surface do not drift. They sink slowly, vanishing without a ripple. Visitors often comment on the quiet, how sound seems to fall flat near the lock house, as if the air itself is heavier. But night changes the canal. The black water begins to shift. Ripples form gently near the center, spreading outward in slow rings. There is no wind. No passing vessel. The surface moves anyway, disturbed by something beneath rather than above. Those who watch long enough notice the pattern. The ripples appear, fade, then return again, always in the same area. The rest of the canal remains smooth and untouched. That is when the sounds begin. At first, it is faint. A low, wet cough carried across the water, barely louder than the movement of the ripples. It comes in uneven bursts, followed by silence. Visitors often mistake it for an animal, until they realize it lacks rhythm or direction. Then comes the splashing. Not violent, not frantic, but irregular, as if someone below the surface is struggling to stay afloat. The sound travels farther than it should, echoing softly against stone walls and the side of the lock house. Those who hear it describe an instinctive reaction to step back from the edge. The darkness feels deeper there, closer. The canal does not invite attention. It pulls it. The lock house itself seems to respond to the activity outside. Floorboards creak without pressure. A door that was closed is found slightly open. Inside, the air grows colder near the windows facing the water, even during warm nights. Local records confirm that accidents were common here when the canal was active. The water was known to be unusually deep at this point, its bottom uneven and unpredictable. Several workers were lost over the years. Some bodies were recovered far downstream. Others were never found. The canal continued to operate regardless. Lock keepers assigned to Blackwater often requested transfers. Logs mention unexplained noises, poor sleep, and persistent unease. One entry describes the sound of breathing coming from outside the window, low and labored, stopping the moment the lantern was raised. There is no official explanation for the darkness of the water. Sediment alone does not account for how completely it absorbs light. Even during inspections, instruments fail to reflect properly on the surface. Depth measurements vary slightly each time they are taken, as if the bottom shifts when observed. At night, the coughing returns more clearly. Those who stand quietly near the bank report hearing water drawn inward, a subtle pull followed by a splash, as though hands are breaking the surface and slipping back under. The sound never grows louder. It never reaches resolution. No bubbles rise. No disturbance marks the spot. Visitors who stay too long describe a pressure in their chest, a sensation of shallow breathing that mirrors the sound coming from the canal. Stepping away from the water relieves it almost immediately. Attempts to record the sounds produce inconsistent results. Some devices capture faint splashes without context. Others record nothing at all, even when the sounds are clearly heard by multiple people at once. The lock house has no power, yet on rare occasions a dim glow appears in the lower windows, reflecting faintly off the black surface of the canal. The light does not flicker. It simply appears, holds, then fades. No source is ever found inside. Those familiar with the area speak quietly of the canal as if it were aware. They avoid approaching after sunset. Fishing lines are never cast into the dark stretch beside the house. Boats pass through quickly, engines idling higher than necessary. They say the water listens. Not to words, but to presence. That it remembers weight and movement. That it holds the last moments of those who entered and did not leave. The coughing and splashing never escalate. They do not chase or follow. They repeat, patient and unresolved, like a moment caught in slow motion. By morning, the canal returns to stillness. The surface becomes flat and unreadable once more. The lock house stands quiet, its windows dark, its doors unmoved. Daylight makes the place seem ordinary again, almost peaceful. But the memory of the night lingers. Those who have heard the sounds find themselves listening to water differently afterward. A passing stream feels louder. A ripple draws attention. Silence near deep water feels incomplete. Blackwater Lock House remains where it has always stood, beside a canal that gives nothing back. It reflects no sky, no trees, no faces leaning over its edge. And when night falls, and the ripples begin, again without wind, the water reminds anyone nearby that some places do not let go of what they take. They only replay it. Widowa's gate quarters sits beside a narrow canal bend where the water slows and deepens before passing through an old stone lock. The building is modest, 2 stories of weathered brick with narrow windows and a low roofline. Ivy climbs the walls, and the ground around it remains damp even in dry seasons. During the day, the quarters appear abandoned but peaceful, a relic of another era left quietly to time. Decades ago, this was home to a lock keeper and his wife. Life here followed the rhythm of water and gates. Days were shaped by arrivals and departures, by the heavy swing of timber doors and the rise and fall of water levels. Nights were long and quiet, broken only by insects, wind, and the constant movement of the canal. The keeper worked odd hours. His wife waited, often alone, listening to the water outside their windows. Records say she was found drowned near the lock one early morning. There were no clear witnesses. Some believed it was an accident, a slip on wet stone in the dark. Others whispered of exhaustion, of loneliness pressing too hard during a storm-filled night. The official report was brief. The canal claimed another life, and the lock continued operating. Afterward, the quarters changed. The canals declined soon after, and eventually the lock was closed. The quarters were sealed and left to sit beside the water, watching it pass without purpose. Visitors now walk the towpath during daylight, reading small plaques and taking photographs. Most pass without noticing anything unusual. The house looks empty. The windows are dark. The doors are locked. The house looks empty. The windows are dark. The doors are locked. It is after midnight that Widowa's gate quarters begins to draw attention. From the towpath, people report seeing a light turn on in the upstairs room. It is always the same window, facing the canal. The glow is soft and steady, not flickering like a lantern or harsh like modern lighting. It appears without sound, illuminating the glass from within. Those who see it often stop, confused. There is no power running to the building. No fixtures remain inside. Yet the light persists, sometimes for minutes, sometimes until dawn. Attempts to approach the house during these moments bring mixed results. Some say the light goes out as soon as they step closer. Others report it remains visible, even as they circle the building, never casting light onto the ground outside. Inside, the halls are empty. No furniture remains. Dust coats the floors. Cobwebs fill the corners. There is no source for the glow, no wiring, no candles. By morning, the room is dark again, indistinguishable from the rest. Along with the light comes sound. Soft crying echoes through the quarters late at night, beginning sometime after the upstairs room brightens. It is faint at first, almost mistaken for wind moving through broken gaps. As the night deepens, the sound becomes clearer. The crying is never loud. It does not wail or call out. It comes in slow waves, rising and falling, as if someone is trying to remain quiet. Grief held inward rather than released. The sound continues until dawn. No footsteps accompany it. No doors open or close. Those who stand outside hear it faintly through walls that should block sound completely. Local historians have searched records for answers. Letters from the period mention the keeper's wife as reserved and devoted. There are notes of illness, of long nights spent alone during storms. Nothing explains why her presence seems tied so tightly to the quarters themselves. Some believe the light marks the room where she waited most often, watching the canal from above. Others think the crying reflects unfinished grief, a life narrowed to isolation and routine. These interpretations vary, but the pattern remains unchanged. Lights after midnight. Crying until dawn. Rangers occasionally check the site when reports come in. They find the building as expected, silent and empty. Sound recording devices pick up faint, irregular noise but nothing clearly identifiable. Cameras sometimes capture a brief glow, sometimes nothing at all. One ranger wrote that the building feels occupied, not by movement, but by attention. As if someone is aware of being observed and chooses when to be noticed. The feeling is not hostile. It is watchful and withdrawn. Visitors who remain near the quarters through the night often report a deep sense of sadness rather than fear. The air feels heavy. Breathing slows. Conversation fades naturally, as if voices are not welcome here after dark. At sunrise, everything stops. The light goes out. The crying ends. Morning birds return, and the canal resumes its ordinary sounds. The quarters stand silent, brick walls warmed slowly by daylight. Widow's Gate Quarters remains closed to the public. There are no tours inside, no overnight stays. The building is preserved but untouched, left as it is. Those responsible for its care do not offer explanations. They acknowledge the reports and log them carefully. Some say places remember what happened within their walls. Others say memory is carried by those who notice patterns and give them meaning. Whatever the truth, the quarters continue their quiet routine. Each night, the upstairs room may glow once more. Soft crying may fill empty halls until the first light of day. The canal flows on, indifferent and steady. A house stands beside the canal, holding a presence shaped by loss. Waiting through the dark hours, until dawn arrives. And the world remembers how to move forward again. Stone Jaw Lock sits where the river narrows, its massive stone walls rising from both banks and curving inward. The channel between them feels constrained, guided, as if the river has been taught exactly where it is allowed to flow. During the day, the lock appears silent and inert. Water passes through steadily, chains resting against iron guides, motionless in the light. The stones hold their position without sound. Visitors walk along the edges and study the craftsmanship, impressed by the scale and precision. Nothing suggests unease beyond the imposing geometry of the walls themselves. At night, the atmosphere changes. As darkness settles and temperatures drop, the water slows slightly, thickening in appearance. Sound carries farther. Every drip and ripple echoes between the stone faces. It is then that the chains begin to move. At first, the sound is subtle. A faint metallic rattle drifts across the water, irregular and brief. It resembles the noise of a chain adjusting under weight, though no mechanism is engaged. Observers often assume wind or current is responsible, until the sound repeats from a different angle. Sharper this time, closer to the stone walls. The chains sway without visible cause. They lift slightly, then settle back against the iron tracks, producing a hollow clinking that echoes through the lock. No pattern to the movement, no rhythm that matches the water or wind. The chains appear to respond to something internal, as though the structure itself is shifting. Fog often accompanies these nights. It rises slowly from the water, filling the narrow channel first before spilling outward. As the fog thickens, visibility drops. The far wall becomes a silhouette. Sound grows distorted, stretched and softened by the heavy air. The lock feels enclosed, sealed off from the world beyond its stone boundaries. It is within this fog that the deeper sounds emerge. Beneath the rattle of chains, a low grinding noise can sometimes be heard. It is not constant. It comes in pulses, brief and unsettling, like stone pressing against stone. Those who hear it struggle to describe the sound accurately. It is not loud. It is intimate, as if carried through the walls rather than the air. Some describe it as bones grinding. The comparison is not made lightly. The sound carries a dry, deliberate quality, slow and resistant. slow and resistant. It feels measured, controlled, as though immense pressure is being applied and released just enough to be heard. The stones are fixed. The chains are secured. There are no active gates or moving parts engaged at night. Structural sensors show no significant shift. Still, the sounds continue on certain nights, unaffected by inspection or monitoring. Local caretakers avoid dismissing the reports. They speak of the loch as a living boundary. Not alive in a biological sense, but responsive. Built to control water, it holds back more than flow. The narrowing of the river concentrates force, sound, and pressure into a confined space. Over time, the structure seems to have learned how to express that pressure. Those who stand close to the water during fog report an unusual sensation. The air feels heavier near the stone walls. Breathing becomes shallow, not from fear, but from awareness. The grinding sound seems to vibrate through the ground, rising faintly into the soles of the feet. The chains rattle intermittently, as if reacting to the same unseen influence. Despite the tension, there is no sudden movement. The walls do not close further. The water does not surge. Everything remains controlled, contained. The sense is not of danger, but of restraint holding firm. The loch appears to be doing exactly what it was designed to do, only in a way that feels more deliberate than mechanical. Those who remain through the night often notice the sounds fade before dawn. As fog thins and light approaches, the grinding grows quieter, then disappears entirely. The chains settle into stillness. The river resumes its ordinary voice. By morning, Stone Jaw Loch looks unchanged, a silent structure guiding water without complaint. The stones show no wear beyond centuries of erosion. The chains hang as they always have. There is no evidence of movement or strain. Only those who heard the sounds carry proof in memory, a shared understanding that something stirs within the loch when conditions align. Some visitors return deliberately, drawn by the mystery. They wait for fog, listening closely, hoping to hear the grinding again. Others avoid the site at night altogether, unsettled by the idea of stone behaving like something capable of pressure and response. Stone Jaw Loch continues to perform its function without interruption. It channels water. It holds firm. And when night deepens and fog closes in, it sometimes reminds those nearby that boundaries are not always silent. Within the narrowing walls, something presses back, not to escape, but to be acknowledged. The massive stones remain locked in place, teeth frozen mid-bite around the river. The chains hang ready, capable of motion without command. And when the fog grows thick enough, the loch speaks in its own language. A low grinding reminder that even the most solid structures can carry tension, memory, and a voice shaped by water, stone, and time. The building stands at the edge of the canal like a patient machine, neither abandoned nor welcoming. Its stone walls are smooth from decades of contact with water and weather. From a distance, it appears calm, almost ordinary. Only when people step closer do they notice the silence pressing in, thicker than the air outside. This structure is known as the slow-rise quarters, a loch designed to manage water levels with extreme precision. Unlike modern systems that lift and lower vessels quickly, this one was built to move at a measured pace. Painfully measured. Every inch of rising water is deliberate, controlled, and slow enough to be felt by the human body. Visitors enter through a narrow passageway that funnels sound inward. Footsteps echo longer than expected. The air inside carries a faint chill, damp but clean. At first, nothing seems unusual. The floor is dry. The walls are solid. The water is still far below. Then the process begins. With no dramatic signal, valves open deep within the structure. Water starts to flow in, quietly, steadily. It does not rush. It does not splash. It simply rises. The movement is subtle enough that many people do not notice right away. They continue walking, observing old gauges, reading plaques, listening to their own breathing. Minutes pass. The water climbs higher. This is how it was designed, they are told. Slow is safe. As the water climbs higher, something else begins to change. Pressure builds gently inside the ears. A soft fullness, like descending a hill or entering a tunnel. Voices carry differently now, bouncing off the water surface. Every movement feels heavier, the air grows cooler, as if the room itself is holding its breath. The pressure increases, slow but relentless. There is no sudden moment of alarm, only a growing awareness that the body is responding to something it cannot control. The body is responding to something it cannot control. Breathing begins to feel shallow. Not because of fear, but because the chest no longer expands as easily. The rising water displaces air upward, compressing the space where people stand. Oxygen is still present, but it feels thinner, less generous. Each breath requires more effort than the last. Some visitors laugh nervously. Others grow quiet. The lock continues its work. Water reaches the waist. The temperature seeps deeper, pulling heat from muscles. Movement becomes deliberate. The pressure in the ears intensifies, now accompanied by a faint ringing for some. The building seems smaller, closer, as if the walls are slowly leaning inward. No alarms sound. No warnings flash. This is intentional. The slow-rise quarters was engineered to demonstrate control, patience, and respect for natural forces. It was never meant to rush. It was never meant to overwhelm. And yet, the human body reacts anyway. At chest height, breathing becomes noticeably difficult. Each inhale feels incomplete. Lungs fill, but not fully. The air presses back. Panic begins to surface, not sudden, but creeping, like a shadow stretching across the floor. Heart rates increase. The water does not stop. Guides watch carefully, trained to recognize the moment when curiosity turns into distress. A stiff posture. Rapid breathing. Eyes fixed on the exit above. The exit always remains visible. Even as the water rises, a dry stairway leads upward, out of the chamber. No one is trapped. No one is forced to stay. The experience relies on choice. Most people leave before the water reaches the shoulders. As they climb, the change is immediate. Pressure releases with each step. Air feels lighter, richer. Breaths deepen. The body resets itself quickly, grateful for the relief. Looking back down, the chamber appears unchanged. Calm. Controlled. Silent. Those who stay longer describe a strange clarity. Time seems to slow along with the water. Thoughts sharpen. Sensations amplify. Every breath becomes a conscious act. Every second feels measured. This effect was studied during the Laka's early years. Engineers and physicians observed how gradual environmental changes influenced perception and stress. The results were subtle but consistent. Slow pressure increases create deeper psychological responses than sudden ones. The body has time to notice. To worry. To imagine. Today, the slow-rise quarters serves as both historical structure and experiential space. It reminds visitors that not all dangers announce themselves loudly. Some arrive quietly, inch by inch, wrapped in patience. When the lock is drained and the chamber returns to stillness, there is no sign of what it can do. No marks on the walls. No warnings in the air. Only stone, water, and silence. Those who have stood inside carry the memory with them. Not of fear, but of awareness. A lesson in how slowly changing conditions can shape the human experience. And how even controlled environments can test the limits of comfort. Breath, and calm. The water always rises the same way. Slow. Unforgiving. And the building waits, ready to demonstrate it again. Red Lantern Lock House sits at a narrow bend in the canal, where the water slows and darkens as if reluctant to move on. The building is small and weathered, its walls stained by decades of damp air and drifting mist. Hanging beside the entrance is the lantern. It is old, its metal frame dulled and pitted, the glass clouded with age. The red hue remains vivid despite everything else fading around it. During the day, it appears harmless, a forgotten relic left behind when the lock house was closed. It hangs from a simple hook, still and quiet, catching sunlight in a muted glow. There is rarely any wind here. The canal banks are sheltered, the trees thick and close. Even on breezy days elsewhere, the air around the lock house feels heavy and unmoving. Leaves fall straight down. Water insects skim the surface without disturbance. Yet the lantern sways. At first, the movement is subtle. A slow, almost thoughtful shift from side to side. Visitors often assume they imagined it, blaming changing light or tired eyes. But if they stop and watch, the motion continues. Gentle. Steady. Unaffected by the stillness around it. As evening approaches, the canal grows quieter. The surface reflects the darkening sky in broken patches. Disturbed only by the occasional ripple along the stone edge. The lock house stands silent, its windows dark, its door closed tight. When night fully arrives, the lantern begins to glow. There is no flame inside. No wiring runs through the wall. Yet a soft red light fills the glass, dim at first, then steady. The glow spills outward, washing the doorway and nearby ground in deep crimson. They stretch across the wall beside the door, long and distorted. But as the movement continues, the shadows sharpen into forms that feel intentional. They look like hands. Long fingers reach upward and outward, stretching across stone and wood. They slide slowly, retract, then reach again. The shapes overlap and separate, never quite touching the door, never fully still. Those who witness this often feel rooted in place. The shadows do not rush or lash out. They move patiently, as if testing the space. Inside the lock house, the air grows colder as the lantern brightens. Dust hangs motionless in the corners. Old furniture sits exactly where it was left, untouched. But the sense of occupation is strong, as if someone has just stepped away from the room. Local history records that the lantern once served as a signal. When lit, it told approaching boats that the lock was attended and ready. Lock keepers were required to keep it visible through the night, a sign of safety and guidance along the dark water. Some keepers worked this lock for decades. Accidents happened here more often than records admit. Sudden surges of water. Slippery stone steps. Late nights and long hours of isolation. The canal demanded attention, and mistakes were unforgiving. The lantern was always lit. Even after the lock house was abandoned, the lantern remained. Attempts to remove it were unsuccessful. Hooks bent. Chains snapped. Those who tried reported a strong resistance, as if the lantern were heavier than it appeared. Eventually, it was left alone. The shadows only appear when the lantern glows. Visitors who arrive during daylight find nothing unusual beyond the gentle sway. At dusk, the glow may or may not appear. But on nights when fog rolls in from the canal, the lantern almost always lights. The shadows become clearer then, their shapes more defined against the misty air. They stretch farther, sometimes reaching across the ground toward the canal edge, then pulling back again. No footprints accompany them. Those who stand too close report a sensation of pressure, like unseen fingers brushing past their arms or shoulders without contact. The feeling fades the moment they step back, but the lantern continues its motion undisturbed. Some believe the shadows are nothing more than light and angle, the product of an old lantern swinging in darkness. Others point out that no nearby objects could create such distinct shapes. Caretakers who occasionally inspect the site avoid staying after sunset. They finish their work early and leave before the lantern has a chance to glow. Logs mention equipment malfunctions and unexplained fatigue when work runs late. One entry notes that the lantern was found swinging more rapidly after being ignored for several days, its shadows covering nearly the entire wall. No one has ever seen the lantern stop on its own. It sways until morning, when the light fades and the shadows withdraw. At dawn, the lantern hangs quietly again, motionless, as if nothing occurred. The canal resumes its slow movement. Birds return to the trees. The lock house looks empty once more. Those who have seen the shadows describe a lingering sense of being summoned rather than threatened. The reaching shapes feel less like warnings and more like requests, repeating a motion learned long ago. Some believe the lantern continues to signal for boats that will never arrive. Others believe it marks the presence of those who kept watch here, hands raised night after night to tend gates and guide vessels through darkness. And when night falls, and the red glow returns, the shadows reach out once more, stretching across the wall in slow, patient motions, reminding anyone who watches that some signals were never meant to go unanswered. Towpath Watch Quarters rests beside a long, straight stretch of canal, where the water moves slowly and reflects the sky like dark glass. The building is low and narrow, built of stone darkened by age and moisture. Today, it stands empty, its purpose faded. Yet its presence still felt by those who walk nearby. During the day, the canal path feels calm. Gravel crunches softly underfoot. Water laps gently against the stone edges. Birds skim the surface. And the air carries the scent of wet earth and old leaves. Visitors stroll without concern, often unaware of the quarters unless they stop to read a small marker set back from the path. It is in the quiet hours, when foot traffic thins and light fades, that the experience changes. People walking along the towpath begin to notice footsteps behind them. At first, the sound blends naturally with their own, an echo carried by stone walls and water. Many assume another walker is approaching from behind, keeping a similar pace. The footsteps continue. They match each step perfectly. When the visitor slows, the sound slows. When they quicken their pace, the footsteps adjust without delay. There is no uneven rhythm, no stumble, no sign of fatigue. The sound remains steady, measured, and close. Most people stop walking at this point. When they do, the footsteps stop as well. The silence that follows feels heavier than before. No gravel shifts. No water splashes. The sound ends so completely that it feels intentional. Turning around reveals an empty path stretching into distance, lit only by fading light or occasional lamps. There is never anyone there. Those who resume walking often hear the footsteps return immediately, falling into place just behind them. The distance never changes. The sound never overtakes them, nor does it fade away. It remains at a respectful distance, close enough to be noticed, far enough to remain unseen. Visitors describe a growing awareness rather than fear. The sensation is not threatening. It is attentive. As if someone is walking alongside without choosing to be seen. This behavior has been reported consistently for decades. Rangers monitoring the area hear the same accounts repeated by different visitors who have never spoken to each other. The details align closely. They always follow. They always stop when the person stops. They never appear visually. Sound recordings taken along the towpath capture mixed results. Sometimes faint rhythmic steps appear on playback. Other times, nothing is recorded despite the visitor clearly hearing the sound at the time. Wind and water noise fail to account for the precise timing. The quarters themselves sit quietly during these events. No lights turn on. No doors move. The building remains still, its windows dark, its interior empty. Yet many report the feeling that the footsteps originate near the quarters, as if something has stepped out to accompany them along the path. Local history offers context but no answers. Towpaths were once busy routes, walked day and night by workers guiding boats, checking lines, and watching for trouble. Some watchmen spent entire shifts pacing the canal, footsteps marking time as water flowed steadily beside them. Their role required constant movement, constant presence. Accidents were common. Accidents were common. Slips into cold water. Collisions in darkness. Storms that turned calm paths into hazards. Records list injuries and disappearances with little detail. Names appear once, then vanish from documentation. Some believe the footsteps are echoes of this routine, movement without destination. Others suggest the quarters still serve their original purpose, watching the path by accompanying those who walk it. The most unsettling detail is the awareness of attention. Visitors often report feeling observed, not stared at, but acknowledged. When they stop and turn, the absence behind them feels deliberate, as if the presence has chosen not to be seen. The footsteps do not rush away. They simply are not there. Those who try to confront the sound find no resolution. Calling out produces no response. Waiting produces nothing. Only movement brings the sound back. A few visitors have attempted to outpace it, breaking into a run. The footsteps remain perfectly aligned, neither chasing nor falling behind. The realization that speed makes no difference often leads people to stop again. Heart racing, breath loud in the still air. And again, the footsteps stop. There are no reports of physical contact. No one has been touched or harmed. The presence does not brush past or block the path. Some visitors report feeling relief when they leave the towpath and rejoin open areas. Others notice the sensation following them briefly, footsteps seeming to echo on pavement or wooden floors, before fading entirely. At dawn, the canal returns to normal. Early walkers hear only their own steps and the sound of water. Towpath Watch Quarters continues to stand beside the canal, its stone walls weathered but intact. It does not call attention to itself. It does not display signs or warnings. It simply exists where it always has, watching a path meant to be walked. As evening approaches and light drains from the sky, the canal grows still again. Shadows stretch across the gravel. Sound carries farther. And if someone chooses to walk the towpath alone, they may notice footsteps joining them. Perfectly timed. Always present. Never visible. When they turn around, the path is empty. Yet the feeling remains, steady and patient, as if something continues its watch, one step behind. Ensuring that no one ever truly walks that path alone. Broken chain lock rests at a bend in the canal where stone walls narrow and water slows. The gate stands heavy and still, its iron surface marked by age and exposure. Beside it lies a snapped length of chain, thick links broken cleanly, resting against the stone as if dropped and forgotten. In daylight, it appears harmless, an artifact of wear and strain left behind after repairs long completed. Visitors notice the chain immediately. It lies slightly apart from the gate mechanism, close enough to suggest it once belonged, yet far enough to feel misplaced. Guides explain that it has been moved several times, always returning to the same position by morning, as if gravity alone prefers it there. As evening approaches, the lock grows quiet. Water settles into a slower rhythm. Sounds echo softly between stone walls. Footsteps carry farther than they should. The chain remains still, catching the last light with a dull sheen. Nothing about it moves, yet some visitors report the uneasy feeling that it has not finished its work. Night brings the sound. It begins faintly, a low scrape against stone, easily confused with shifting gravel or drifting debris. Then the sound repeats, clearer and closer. A dragging motion, heavy and deliberate, moving across the stone floor near the gate. The rhythm is uneven, stopping and starting without pattern. Those who listen carefully realize the sound does not match the position of the chain. It seems to come from different angles, sometimes behind, sometimes beside the gate. The chain itself remains visible and unmoving. Yet the dragging continues, as if another length of metal mirrors its presence just out of sight. The sound travels slowly. Each scrape carries weight, suggesting effort rather than momentum. It does not rush. It does not hesitate. It moves with the patience of something being pulled along deliberately, link by link, across the stone surface. Some visitors report feeling a brief pressure near their feet. A sudden tightening around the ankle, light but unmistakable, as though a loop of chain has brushed or wrapped there for a moment. The sensation is cold and firm, lasting no more than a second. When they look down, nothing is there. The feeling releases as quickly as it came. There is no pain. No mark is left behind. Shoes and clothing show no disturbance. Yet the certainty of contact remains, vivid and precise. Those who experience it often freeze in place, unsure whether to move or stand still. Caretakers have documented these reports for years. They note that the sensation never pulls, never trips, never restrains. It wraps and releases, as if testing presence rather than claiming it. No one has been injured. No one has been forced to remain. The experience ends on its own, without escalation. Attempts to capture the sound have been inconsistent. Audio recordings sometimes pick up faint scraping, though playback rarely conveys the same weight reported by listeners. Motion sensors show no disturbance near the chain. Cameras reveal nothing unusual. The phenomenon resists observation, existing most clearly in direct experience. Local history offers partial context. Records show the chain once secured the gate during high water, absorbing immense strain over decades. It failed during a storm long past, snapping under pressure that exceeded its design. The gate held. The chain did not. Repairs replaced it, but the broken length was never removed entirely. Some believe the chain remembers tension. Metal shaped by force does not forget easily. The repeated stress, the sudden failure, the abrupt release, may have left an imprint that still seeks resolution. The dragging sound, they suggest, is not movement but memory replaying under the right conditions. Others see the phenomenon as a warning. The lock controls water with careful balance. Chains, gates, and stone all work together to hold pressure in check. The broken chain represents a point of failure, a reminder of what happens when limits are reached. Its presence keeps the system mindful of restraint. Some laugh it off, attributing sensations to imagination and darkness. Others leave quickly, unsettled by the certainty of contact without cause. A few return deliberately, curious to experience the phenomenon again, hoping to understand its rhythm and meaning. Those who stay longer often notice a pattern. The dragging sound tends to follow movement. When visitors walk along the edge of the lock, the sound shifts position subtly, keeping pace without matching steps. When they stop, it pauses as well. The brief ankle sensation often occurs when attention drifts, when the mind wanders away from surroundings. At dawn, the lock resets. Light returns, and the dragging never carries into morning. The chain lies exactly where it was before, unchanged. Stone shows no new marks. Water flows as expected. Daytime visitors find nothing unusual beyond the broken metal resting quietly beside the gate. Yet those who were present at night carry the memory. The sound of metal on stone lingers in thought. The brief pressure around the ankle remains vivid. Not frightening, but intimate. A boundary briefly acknowledged. Broken chain lock continues to function without incident. The gate opens and closes as designed. The water obeys its channel. The snapped chain remains beside the wall, an object out of place that refuses to leave. When night falls again and the lock grows quiet, the dragging may return. Slow. Heavy. Patient. A sound that moves without moving. A touch that leaves no trace. And for those who hear it, the experience becomes part of the place itself. A subtle interaction between structure, memory, and those who step too close to the edge of what once held fast. The structure known as the Drowned Bell Quarters rests beside a slow-moving river where the banks widen and the current loses its urgency. From above, the place looks ordinary, a low stone building surrounded by reeds and water-worn steps. There is nothing dramatic about its outline, nothing that suggests the sound that now defines it. Long ago, the bell inside served a practical purpose. When the river rose during seasonal floods, the bell warned workers and nearby residents that the water had reached a dangerous level. Its tone was clear and sharp, designed to cut through rain and wind. It rang only when pulled by human hands, and only when needed. That time has passed. The river changed its course over decades, slowly reclaiming land that once stayed dry. The lower levels of the structure were submerged inch by inch. Rather than remove the bell, caretakers sealed the chamber around it, believing the water would silence it forever. For many years, that seemed to be true. Then the sound returned. It was first reported by night watchmen who worked along the river path. They described a low, uneven ringing that drifted across the water after midnight. The sound was faint, almost hesitant, and nothing like the bell once heard during floods. It was muffled and warped, as if filtered through layers of distance and depth. The bell chamber now sits fully submerged, hidden below the surface where light barely reaches. Algae coats the stone. Fish move through broken openings where doors once stood. The bell itself hangs motionless in the current, its metal darkened by time and water. There is no mechanical system attached. No ropes. No motors. No human access. Yet the ringing continues. Hydrologists were among the first to study the phenomenon. They measured changes in pressure, temperature, and current speed. At night, the river cools, becoming denser. Subtle shifts in flow push against the submerged structure. Water moves through narrow passages, creating vibrations that pass through metal. In theory, these vibrations could cause the bell to move. In practice, the timing remains difficult to explain. The ringing does not happen every night. It favors calm evenings, when the surface of the river is smooth. And the air feels heavy. The sound rises slowly, a single tone stretched and softened by water. Traveling upward, distorted by depth, reaching the shore as something unfamiliar and uneasy. Listeners describe it as distant, even when standing close. As if the bell is ringing somewhere far below the present moment. Residents nearby have learned to recognize the sound. Conversations pause when it begins. Windows are closed, not out of fear, but habit. The ringing does not grow louder. It simply repeats, spaced out, patient. Then it stops. During daylight, divers have explored the flooded chamber. They report no movement. The bell hangs still, heavy and silent. Silt gathers at its base. Aquatic plants brush against it gently, never enough to cause motion. Sound recordings taken underwater capture nothing unusual. The bell remains quiet until night. Acoustic experts suggest that sound behaves differently in layered environments. Water temperature changes create channels that bend and carry sound in unexpected ways. Others remain unconvinced. The bell does not ring during storms, when vibrations are strongest. It avoids nights with strong currents. Instead, it favors stillness. Conditions that seem least likely to create movement somehow produce sound. The structure itself adds to the mystery. The stone walls were designed to amplify the bell during floods, shaping its tone so it would carry across open land. Now those same walls shape the sound underwater, stretching it, muting it, changing its character entirely. What once warned of danger now feels reflective, almost mournful. There is no record of loss directly tied to the building. No tragic event, no singular moment frozen in history. The bell did its job well, and people listened when it rang. The river rose, then fell, again and again, without catastrophe. And yet, the sound lingers. Visitors who come at night often describe a strange effect. The ringing seems to slow time. Footsteps feel heavier. The river appears darker. The sound does not provoke panic, but it draws attention inward, encouraging stillness and listening. Some report that the bell feels closer when they look away. Others say it feels older than the structure itself. Authorities have considered removing the bell. The idea resurfaces every few years, usually after a wave of public interest. Each time, the decision is postponed. The sound causes no harm. And something about the bell feels worth preserving, even if it no longer serves its original purpose. When the ringing fades, the night returns to its normal rhythm. Insects resume their chorus. Water laps against stone. The air lightens. By morning, there is no trace of the sound. The drowned bell quarter stands quietly, half forgotten by daylight. Only those who have heard the bell at night carry the memory with them. A tone pulled from below the surface, shaped by water, time, and silence. A reminder that some signals never fully disappear. They simply change how they are heard. Narrow gatehouse stands beside a canal lock so tight that boats once passed through with only inches to spare. The building itself mirrors that design. From the outside, it looks modest and unremarkable, a small structure pressed close to stone walls and dark water. Its proportions seem ordinary in daylight, even welcoming in their simplicity. The unease begins the moment someone steps inside. The doorway opens into a narrow interior space where the ceiling feels lower than expected. The walls stand closer together than memory allows, as if the room has subtly rearranged itself after the door closes. Air feels heavier here, slower to move. Sound dulls, footsteps softened as though absorbed by the structure itself. At first, visitors dismissed the sensation as imagination. The lock house was built small, after all. Space was never a luxury for canal keepers. Everything had a purpose, and comfort came second to function. It is not panic, but pressure. A quiet insistence that standing still is the wrong choice. The narrow hallway leading deeper into the house seems to pull attention forward, drawing the eye toward the far wall and the small window beyond. As people move, the sensation follows. Hands seem to press gently against their backs. Not gripping, not forceful, but unmistakably present. The pressure is firm enough to register, warm enough to feel intentional. urging rather than shoving. The pressure is firm enough to register, warm enough to feel intentional. It urges movement forward, step by step, guiding rather than shoving. Most visitors instinctively turn around. When they do, the pressure eases, but the space feels even tighter. The walls close in just enough to raise breath and quicken the heart. Turning forward again brings relief, as if the house approves of the direction chosen. Those who continue toward the inner rooms report the strongest sensations. The narrow passage becomes more pronounced. Shoulders brush walls that should not be that close. The air feels compressed, pushing inward from all sides. The pressure at the back grows steadier, guiding visitors through the space with quiet persistence. No footsteps are heard behind them. The lock house was once occupied by keepers responsible for controlling one of the most difficult gates on the canal. The passage was so tight that precision was required every time water levels changed. Mistakes could jam the gates or damage boats. The work demanded constant forward motion, constant attention. Records show that several accidents occurred here over the years. Boats wedged too tightly. Water surging faster than expected. Workers trapped between stone and wood with little room to escape. The canal moved on regardless, indifferent to who stood in its path. Locals believe the house remembers that pressure. Visitors who reach the far room often feel the hands lift away. The space opens slightly, enough to breathe more easily. A small window looks out over the locked gates, framing a narrow view of dark water and stone walls pressed close together. From here, the purpose of the house becomes clear. Everything funnels forward. There is no room to linger, no space to turn back easily. Those who stop here too long report dizziness, a sense of compression returning from all sides. The pressure urges movement again, this time toward the exit. The house does not allow rest. Attempts to measure the interior reveal nothing unusual. Walls are straight. Dimensions are consistent with original plans. There is no physical mechanism that could create the sensation of closing space. Yet nearly everyone who enters describes the same experience. Some feel the hands only once. Others feel them repeatedly, guiding them from room to room. A few describe multiple points of contact, as if more than one presence is urging them forward. The pressure is never violent. It feels purposeful, almost routine. Those who resist the movement report discomfort intensifying. Breathing feels restricted. The walls feel closer. The urge to leave becomes overwhelming. Once outside, the sensation vanishes almost instantly. The canal outside the house mirrors this effect. Boats entering the narrow gate are drawn forward by water pressure. Unable to stop or turn until they pass through completely. The design allows no hesitation. Caretakers who inspect the house. Complete tasks quickly and avoid lingering. Logs mention feelings of claustrophobia and disorientation. Even among those familiar with confined spaces. Night amplifies the experience. After sunset, the interior grows darker, the narrowness more pronounced. The pressure appears sooner, sometimes the moment the door closes. Those who enter at night often describe the sensation of being guided immediately, as if the house has been waiting. No lights turn on by themselves. No objects move. The house does not rely on spectacle. Its effect is subtle, internal, difficult to explain and impossible to ignore. By morning, the house feels almost normal again. Sunlight through the windows softens the interior. The walls seem less intrusive. Visitors during the day may feel only a hint of the pressure, easy to dismiss if unexamined. But those who experienced the full sensation never forget it. Narrow gatehouse does not frighten through sound or shadow. It does not announce its presence. Instead, it recreates a feeling learned through years of function and force. Forward motion. Limited space. No room for hesitation. The hands that press against visitors do not feel threatening. They feel instructive, repeating a task performed countless times before. Move forward. Do not stop. Pass through. And when someone steps inside, the walls remember their purpose. They close in just enough. And something unseen ensures that no one lingers where they were never meant to stay. There is a place where water and weather conspire. A bend in an old industrial canal, long past its days of commerce, now home to something far less tangible. The locals, the ones who have lived in the rows of old workers' cottages for generations, call it Fog Bend. They speak of it in hushed tones, a curious mixture of reverence and unease. This is a quiet place, until it is not. The fog here is a phenomenon. It does not roll in gently from the distant river. It coalesces. On certain evenings, when the air grows still and the temperature drops just so, a milky white vapor begins to gather right at the apex of the bend. It pools in the hollows of the towpath, thickens between the skeletal remains of old mooring posts. It becomes a solid, shifting wall, obscuring the far bank and the weeping willows that guard it. But the fog is merely the stage. The actors are the figures. They appear within the depths of the white, human-shaped silhouettes that seem woven from the mist itself. A man in a long coat, standing motionless, facing the water. A smaller shape, perhaps a woman, hunched as if against a chill that no longer exists. Sometimes two or three, a silent gathering in the gloom. They do not move with purpose. They simply are. The most consistent account comes from a night watchman at a nearby warehouse, a man named David. He walks his dog along the towpath every evening, a ritual of quiet reflection. One night, he saw a figure of a child near the water's edge, seeming to look for something lost. Concerned, David called out. He quickened his step, his beam of torchlight cutting through the fog. As he drew within 20 paces, the small figure dissolved. Not a fading, but a sudden unmaking, the mist that formed it simply rejoining the greater whole. When David reached the spot, there was nothing. No child, no footprints in the soft mud. Only a lingering, distinct smell in the damp air. The scent of wet wool, of damp cotton, like clothes left out in a downpour, heavy and cold. It was a smell out of time, a prelude to illness in an era before central heating. It was the smell of the quarters, the cramped homes where the canal workers once lived. This is the heart of the mystery. Fog Bend Quarters. The name does not refer to the bend itself, but to the long-vanished housing built for the men who dug and maintained the canal in the early 1800s. They were poor, hard-lived men and women. Their days were spent in mud and water, their clothes perpetually damp. Historians note that disease was rampant in those crowded, damp dwellings. The quarters were demolished over a century ago, replaced by slightly better homes. But the memory of that life, of that constant, chilling damp, seems etched into the very land. The figures are not aggressive. They do not speak or gesture. They are echoes, impressions left upon a location by a collective experience of profound and repeated sensation. Some parapsychologists suggest places can absorb emotional energy, like a sponge absorbs water. Fog Bend, with its specific atmospheric conditions, acts as a playback device. The fog provides the medium, and the deep, pervasive memory of wet clothes, of a chill that seeped into the bone, provides the form. A local historian, Elara Vance, has spent years in the archives. She speaks of the ledgers she has found, lists of names from the quarters. Many children, she notes, did not survive their first winters. The damp was a silent reaper. She believes the phenomena are not ghosts in a traditional sense, but a kind of environmental memory. The bend in the canal, a perfect collector for cold air and moisture, recreates the physical conditions of that time, and in doing so, briefly gives shape to the residual imprint of those who endured it. To stand at Fog Bend on a clear night is to see nothing but an old canal. But on those specific nights, when the fog thickens into a curtain, the past breathes. It is a sad, quiet past. A glimpse of a hardship so consistent it became part of the fabric of the people. The figures are not aware of us. They are locked in their own moment, a permanent instant of weary existence. The lesson of Fog Bend is not one of fear, but of resonance. It suggests that some experiences are so powerful, so uniformly felt by a community, that they can leave a mark on the world itself. A mark that only appears under the right conditions. Like invisible ink held to a flame. It is a story of industry and sacrifice. Written not in books, but in mist and memory. The next time you see a thick fog gathering in a low place, by old water or forgotten paths, take a breath. The air might just smell of rain, of earth. But perhaps, for a fleeting second, you might catch the faint, unmistakable scent of history. The smell of wet clothes, of a cold that has waited patiently in the stones and the water, for the right moment to show you its shape. Before fading quietly back into the night. Lock of the Lost Boat sits along a quiet stretch of canal where water slows and stone walls rise high and close. During the day, it appears no different from any other lock, sturdy and functional, guiding vessels through changes in elevation with practiced ease. The water moves calmly. The gates stand firm. Nothing hints at the story tied to this place until night begins to settle. Long ago, a cargo boat entered the lock and never emerged. Records confirm its arrival. Weather was mild. The lock functioned normally. Crew and cargo were accounted for before entry. Yet by morning, the chamber stood empty. No wreckage surfaced downstream. No trace was found upstream. The boat simply vanished within the stone walls. Leaving behind unanswered questions. And a quiet unease that never fully faded. As darkness falls, the lock grows restless. The first sound often arrives after midnight, faint and hollow. A scraping noise echoes between the walls, slow and uneven, like wood dragged against stone. The sound carries depth, as if coming from within the chamber itself rather than across the surface of the water. It does not repeat mechanically. It hesitates, then resumes, mimicking the strain of a vessel adjusting its position. Listeners recognize the sound immediately. It is unmistakably wood, thick and worn, pressing against stone with careful resistance. The noise suggests weight and size, something larger than debris, something shaped and deliberate. Those familiar with boats describe the sound as a hull shifting in tight quarters, the way timber groans when forced against unyielding walls. Without visible cause, the surface begins to move. Small waves form, sloshing gently from side to side within the lock. The motion feels contained, controlled, as though displaced by a heavy mass below or just beyond sight. The water level does not rise or fall, yet it behaves as if something is trying to pass through, testing the space repeatedly. The gates remain closed. Chains hang still. Mechanisms show no engagement. There is no current strong enough to explain the movement. Still, the water continues to shift in measured pulses, each one arriving alongside the faint scrape of wood on stone. The timing suggests coordination rather than coincidence. Those who stand near the edge often feel the vibration first. A subtle tremor travels through the stone walkway and into the soles of the feet. It is not strong enough to alarm, but clear enough to be noticed. The lock feels occupied, as though its purpose has resumed temporarily, operating for a vessel that cannot be seen. Local caretakers acknowledge the phenomenon quietly. They confirm that the sounds occur only on certain nights, usually when the air is still and the water calm. No weather pattern predicts it. No mechanical test replicates it. The lock behaves normally during the day, offering no hint of the nocturnal activity that returns without warning. Some believe the lost boat never completed its passage. The lock is a place of transition, designed to hold vessels briefly between states. The theory suggests the cargo boat became caught in that pause, neither released nor retained, leaving behind an imprint that replays under the right conditions. The scraping and sloshing are not current events, but echoes repeating an unfinished movement. Others point to the sound of effort. The noises do not suggest collision or damage. They suggest persistence. The wood scrapes slowly, as if guided by careful hands. The water shifts as though responding to deliberate adjustment. The impression is not of an accident, but of a task still being attempted. Visitors who remain long enough often report a growing sense of anticipation. Each scrape feels like preparation. Each slosh suggests momentum building. Some expect the gates to move on their own, to open just enough for something unseen to continue forward. That moment never arrives. The sounds repeat, then gradually fade, leaving the lock unchanged and silent once more. No physical evidence remains by morning. The stone walls show no new marks. The water lies flat and calm. The lock operates normally for passing boats. Crews report nothing unusual during daylight transit. Only those present at night carry the memory of what they heard. A former night watch described the experience as standing beside a working lock with no vessel present. The sounds followed the correct sequence. The timing felt right. Yet there was nothing to see. The lock performed its role for an absence, responding to weight and movement that existed only through sound and motion. Some visitors swear they hear more than scraping. Between the sounds of wood and water, faint creaks sometimes emerge, like timbers adjusting under strain. Not voices, not language, but the natural noise of a vessel under pressure. These sounds remain indistinct, never forming a clear pattern, yet they deepen the sense that the lock is hosting something incomplete. Despite the unease, there is no fear. The atmosphere is solemn rather than threatening. The lock does not feel dangerous. It feels occupied, focused on a task it cannot finish. The lost boat does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply continues, quietly, to attempt passage. As dawn approaches, the activity slows. The scraping grows softer. The water settles. The final sounds fade into the stone, leaving behind a stillness that feels heavier than before. Morning light reveals nothing unusual. The lock stands ready for its next vessel, as it always has. Lock of the Lost Boat remains a place of routine by day and remembrance by night. The cargo boat that vanished is not seen, but it is not entirely gone. Its presence lingers in sound and motion, replaying the moment it entered a space designed for passage. And never quite left it. When night falls and the canal grows quiet, the lock listens once more, responding to the weight of something unseen that is still trying, patiently, to move through. The room sits at the end of a narrow corridor, separated from the rest of the building by a door that no longer closes completely. Light reaches it only in thin lines, slipping through high windows and settling quietly on the floor. Dust gathers slowly here, undisturbed, as if even the air hesitates to move. This space is known as the keeper's last room. It was once a small bedroom belonging to the caretaker of the surrounding structure. Records describe the keeper as reliable, solitary, and deeply familiar with the building's rhythms. He lived close to his work, sleeping within the walls he maintained, listening to the sounds that others ignored. When he left, the room remained. Nothing was removed. The narrow bed still rests against the far wall. A simple table stands beside it. A chair faces the window, angled slightly, as if positioned for watching something outside. The floorboards creak softly, not with age alone, but with memory. Visitors often notice the temperature first. The room is always colder than the hallway outside. Even during warmer months, the air feels settled and heavy, as if the warmth cannot quite enter. The bed, in particular, holds a deep chill. People place their hands on the blanket and pull them back quickly, surprised by how cold it feels, as though it has never absorbed body heat. Caretakers have checked for drafts. None explain it fully. The walls are bare. No photographs. No decorations. Only faint discolorations where objects once leaned, leaving outlines like shadows that never fully faded. The ceiling is low enough to make taller visitors straighten their posture without realizing why. Standing inside the room creates an unexpected sensation. It begins as a mild awareness, easy to dismiss. A feeling of presence that does not come from sound or movement, but from attention. People describe it as the sense of being observed without knowing from where. When visitors face the doorway, the bed remains just outside their direct view. It sits behind them, quiet and still. Many report an instinctive urge to glance back, convinced that something has shifted. Nothing ever has. Those who linger begin to notice small details. The way the room seems to hold silence longer than expected. The way footsteps from outside sound distant and muted. The way breathing feels slightly louder, as if the room is listening. Historical notes offer no dramatic ending. The keeper did not vanish. There was no sudden event recorded within these walls. He simply stopped living here. His position was replaced. The building continued to function. But the room was never reassigned. Staff over the years chose not to use it. Some cited discomfort. Others said the room felt occupied, even when empty. Practical reasons were offered, but the result was the same. The door stayed open. The bed stayed cold. Psychologists who studied visitor reactions suggested environmental causes. Small rooms can trigger heightened awareness. Cold temperatures increase sensitivity. Limited visibility invites imagination. Visitors from different backgrounds describe similar sensations without being prompted. The feeling of being watched. The impression that someone is lying on the bed just out of sight. Not threatening. Not active. Simply present. Some say the presence feels tired. As if it never fully left. Measurements taken inside the room show no unusual readings. No electromagnetic fluctuations. No abnormal sound levels. Nothing that would suggest activity beyond the ordinary. And yet, guides rarely stay inside for long. They often pause before answering. They say the room does not feel empty. At certain times of day, the light shifts in a way that makes the bed appear slightly sunken. As though weight has pressed into the mattress. This effect disappears when viewed directly. It is a trick of angles and shadow, easily explained. And yet, unsettling in its consistency. The room has been preserved intentionally. Not as an attraction, but as a record. A space that reflects how closely the keeper lived with his work. How the building was never just a structure, but a companion that required constant attention. Perhaps it remembers routine. Sleep. Waking. Watching. Those who step inside often lower their voices without realizing it. Conversations fade. Movements slow. There is a shared sense that the room prefers quiet, as though sound itself is intrusive. When visitors leave, the hallway feels warmer. The air moves again. Perhaps it remembers routine. Sleep. Waking. Watching. Looking back, the room appears unchanged. Still. Plain. Ordinary. Only those who have stood inside know the difference. The keeper's last room does not demand belief or fear. It does not present evidence or spectacle. It simply exists, holding a quiet tension that resists explanation. A small bedroom left untouched. A bed that never warms. And a feeling that someone remains, watching, resting just beyond sight, unwilling or unable to fully leave the place they once called home. The Lochmoor Canal winds its way through the countryside, a silent, man-made river carrying the weight of history. By day, it is a place of tranquility. Water laps gently at mossy stone banks, and the great iron gates that regulate its flow stand as monuments to a bygone industrial age. But at Loch Gate 7, a different story is told after sunset. It centers on a single, massive hand wheel. Forged from iron, taller than a man, its spokes are worn smooth by generations of lockkeepers. This wheel controls a sluice gate deep below the waterline, a task that requires immense physical effort. For decades now, the staff who maintain the canal have reported a peculiar phenomenon. The wheel at Gate 7 turns by itself. Night watchmen, making their rounds with lanterns in hand, were the first to speak of it. They would approach the gate, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path, and see the wheel stationary. Then, as if gripped by an invisible hand, it would begin to rotate. Not a quick, jerking motion, but a slow, deliberate turn, the iron groaning in protest. The sound is not a simple squeak. It is a deep, metallic scream that echoes down the empty canal, a sound that carries farther than it should. Officials initially dismissed these accounts as the product of tired minds or shifting metal due to temperature changes. But the stories persisted, and a pattern emerged. The mechanics were checked, the gears inspected. No fault, no hydraulic pressure, no natural explanation could be found for the movement. Then came the other reports, from anglers who stayed too late and cyclists taking a midnight shortcut. They spoke of a feeling of being watched from the black water. And an even more unsettling detail. Some claimed the wheel's movement changed when a person was present. It would turn faster, the metallic screams growing more urgent, almost frantic, before grinding to a halt. The local folklore absorbed the mystery. They called it the rusted wheel quarters, named for the measured, quarter turns it always made. Older residents whisper about a lockkeeper from a century past, a man named Elias Hargrave. He was devoted to his post at Gate 7, known for his meticulous timing in opening and closing the sluices to manage the water levels for the barges. The story goes that one winter night, during a terrible flood, Hargrave was at the wheel. The river was rising, threatening to overflow and wash away the downstream village. He needed to open the gate fully to relieve the pressure, a task that required multiple turns of the massive wheel. He was straining against the iron, the cold rain lashing his face, when he slipped on the wet stone. He fell, striking his head. The water found him before anyone else did. Since that night, the gate at Loch 7 has never operated quite right. And some believe that Hargrave never left his post. That his spirit remains, feeling the phantom pressure of a rising flood. That only he can sense. The quarter turns of the wheel are his endless, spectral attempt to complete his final duty. To open the gate and save the village he failed to protect that night. Modern investigation has brought skeptics with instruments. Time-lapse cameras have been set up. On several recordings, the wheel is seen to move, defying all logical explanation. The data shows no seismic activity, no wind strong enough to move such a weight. The sound recordings are perhaps the most chilling. Beneath the groan of iron, there is a faint, rhythmic pattern, like the strained breathing of a man pushing with all his might. The Canal Authority no longer assigns night watches to Gate 7 alone. The path is now closed after dark, though the official reason is listed as structural maintenance. Yet, those who live nearby know. On still nights, when the moon is high, the sound still carries. A long, low shriek of rusted iron turning through the dark. It is a sound that prompts you to look over your shoulder, to peer into the inky blackness of the canal water. To peer into the inky blackness of the canal water. It is a reminder that some places hold on to their history, and some duties transcend even time itself. A wheel turns, not with menace, but with a tragic purpose. A ghost in the machine, forever measuring out the quarters of a task left undone. Bound to the very metal he once commanded, listening for a flood that only he can hear coming. In the heart of the old county park, nestled where the forest grows dense and the sunlight filters down in dusty beams. It is a forgotten place, a relic of a water management system long since decommissioned. The lock gates, made of heavy, weathered oak, stand perpetually shut, holding back a deep, placid pool of dark water. The air here is always cooler, thick with the scent of wet stone and decaying leaves. And it is here, in this still and shadowed place, that the water moves without cause. The phenomenon is both simple and deeply unsettling. On the calmest of days, when not a breath of wind stirs the canopy, a sudden, violent splash will erupt from the center of the lock pool. It is the sound of a large, heavy object hitting the water with tremendous force. A perfect, explosive splash. Yet, when the eye snaps to the spot, the surface is unbroken. Nothing has fallen from the trees above. No animal has dived in. Only the evidence of the sound remains, in the form of perfect, concentric rings rippling outward from the empty epicenter. The phenomenon is both simple and deeply unsettling. They travel to the mossy walls, sloshing softly against the stone, as if greeting a ghost. Visitors who experience it often stand frozen, their minds struggling to reconcile the clear auditory truth with the visual lie. The sound is too real, too physical, to be imaginary. It carries the weight and the hollow boom of a substantial mass hitting deep water. And then, just as the last ripple fades, sometimes, a new layer is added. From the far bank, or perhaps from the dense thicket of ferns, the clear, bright sound of children's laughter will drift across the water. It is not a single voice, but a chorus of 2 or 3, full of unbridled joy and playful energy. The sequence is a haunting refrain. The silent splash, the spreading rings, the echoing laughter. The history of the lock provides a fragile framework for understanding. A century ago, this was a vital link in a local canal system, and the lockkeeper's cottage stood just up the slope. Archival photographs show a sturdy house with a small, tidy garden. Census records tell of a lockkeeper named Alastair Finn, who lived there with his wife and their 3 young children. Neighbors described them as a lively bunch, the children often playing along the canal banks, their games punctuated by laughter that carried on the water. The official record is sparse and tragic. It states that one autumn afternoon, the middle child, a boy of 7, was reported missing. A search commenced, focusing on the deep lock pool. Despite dragging the basin, no body was ever recovered. The family, shrouded in grief, moved away within the month. The cottage fell into disrepair and was eventually demolished. The canal itself was closed not long after, its business diverted to newer, larger waterways. The silent splash lock was abandoned to nature and memory. Psychoacoustic experts suggest that certain locations can act as natural sound recorders. Intense emotional events, they theorize, can somehow imprint sonic energy upon the environment. Particularly in places with specific mineral compositions or water sources. The trauma and the profound mystery of that day, the culmination of a childhood that was until then filled with play, may have left a permanent echo in the very stone and water of the loch. But the phenomenon feels more complex than a simple replay. The splash is always first, a violent punctuation in the quiet. Then come the ripples, a visual signature of the unseen event. And only afterward, sometimes, the laughter. It is the carefree laughter of play, perhaps from moments before a catastrophic accident, or perhaps from a spirit of play that simply refuses to end. To stand by the loch is to feel a profound duality. It is a place of deep peace, of dappled light and quiet water. And then, without warning, it becomes a theater for a mystery written in sound. You are not watching a ghost, you are hearing a moment. A moment of impact, and a moment of joy, forever linked in a cycle no one can fully decipher. Some who have heard it describe a feeling not of dread, but of a poignant sadness, quickly followed by a strange sense of release. The laughter seems to cleanse the air after the shock of the splash. It is a reminder that even in the heart of a tragedy, the memory of happiness persists. The children are not here as lost souls, but as an echo of their liveliest selves, forever playing at the water's edge. The silent splash loch does not offer answers. It offers an experience. A challenge to our perception of reality and time. It reminds us that some places are not just locations on a map, but repositories of stories written in a language of sound and sensation. The next time you are near a still body of water in a quiet wood, listen. Beyond the chirp of birds and the rustle of leaves, you might just hear the echoes of a past that refuses to be completely silent. A splash without a cause, followed by the timeless, resilient sound of play. The architecture of power is often written in stone and steel, in grand facades and towering spires. But there is another language, one of inches and angles, ofa ae carved not from threat, but from geometry. Welcome to a place known informally as the low ceiling quarters. From the main corridor, the entrance appears unremarkable. A simple archway, darker than the surrounding stone. Yet, the first change is not visual, but instinctual. Tall visitors report a subtle shift in the air density. A slight chill unrelated to temperature. They approach the threshold, their posture already unknowingly adjusting. The doorway is not low enough to force an immediate duck. It is a mere few inches shorter than standard. The mind calculates the clearance, estimates the safe passage. And then the body obeys, dipping the head and shoulders in a slight, instinctive bow. You have entered on its terms. Inside, the room unfolds. It is a sitting room, or perhaps a waiting chamber. Furnishings are sparse, elegant even. But the eye is not drawn to the chairs or the lone table. It is drawn upward, or rather, it is prevented from going upward. The ceiling here is palpably low. For a person of average height, it might feel close, intimate. For anyone taller, the mathematics of the space become immediately personal. Inside, the room unfolds. The ceiling does not loom. It simply exists, at a fixed and uncompromising height. The effect is not one of sudden shock, but of a slow, pressing realization. Something presses down on their shoulders. It is not a physical weight, but a profound psychological pressure. The sheer mass of the building above, now brought into intimate relation with the crown of one's head, generates a silent, steady urgency. To stand at full height is to feel the cool stone almost grazing the hair. The space seems to shrink incrementally, though the walls do not move. The body's own desire to avoid contact begins to hunch the spine. The shoulders creep upward towards the ears, a defensive posture against the relentless, static downward press. There are no guards here. No voices. Only the room itself. Whispered commands urge them to kneel. These whispers are not auditory. They are murmured by the neck, strained from being pulled forward and down. The command is a logical solution, whispered by the body's own discomfort. To kneel upon the thick rug is to find immediate, profound relief. The pressure vanishes. The ceiling suddenly feels distant, the room spacious. The act of kneeling, of surrendering that vertical pride, restores a sense of order and comfort. The architecture has guided the body to its preferred state of being. One might then observe the details intended for this lowered perspective. A frieze along the wall depicting scenes of harvest and labor, figures bent to their tasks, their forms echoing the posture now assumed. The room's beauty, its art, its very functionality, is curated for the lowered eye. To stand is to be alien. To kneel is to be included. The purpose of such a space is rarely documented. Scholars debate its intent. Was it a lesson in humility for proud nobles? A physical metaphor for bowing before authority? Was it a psychological tool in negotiations, placing taller, perhaps physically dominant visitors at a perpetual postural disadvantage? Their bodies subtly communicating submission before a word was spoken? Or was it simply a design quirk, an aesthetic choice that accidentally yielded profound psychological effects? We may never know the architect's true motive. But the low-ceiling quarters stand as a silent testament to a profound truth. Our minds are shaped by our bodies, and our bodies are shaped by the spaces they inhabit. Power can be expressed not only by what is built high, but by what is built deliberately, insistently low. It reminds us that the most effective commands are often those never spoken aloud. They are built into the doorways we must bow to enter. Into the ceilings that gently push down upon us. And in the quiet, overwhelming relief we feel when we finally choose to kneel. The architecture waits, patient and immutable, for the body to learn its silent language. And in that quiet education, a form of authority is exerted that no shouted decree could ever achieve. The air in the mountain pass is thin and sharp. It is not a fortress, not a temple. It is simply known as the split stone lock. From a distance, it seems a natural part of the mountain. A great wall of fitted stone blocks, each larger than a man, seals what appears to be the entrance to a cavern. But a single, jagged fracture runs down its center, from top to bottom. This is where our story begins. The crack runs through the stone wall. It is no wider than a hand's breadth, a dark vein against the gray rock. For centuries, it was just a curiosity for the rare shepherd who wandered this high. They would press an ear to the cold stone and hear nothing but the sigh of the wind. But sometimes, the wind changes. Cold air pours from it. This is the first true mystery. Even on the hottest summer day, when the sun bakes the bare rock, a persistent chill exhales from that narrow opening. It is a deep, subterranean cold that smells of damp minerals and time itself. This phenomenon alone made the lock a place of local legend. People said it was the mountain breathing. Voices echo from deep inside, repeating old work orders. They are faint, like a memory of sound. They do not speak in sentences, but in fragments. Measurements are called out. Numbers for rock dimensions. Commands for lever placements. Warnings about pressure and alignment. The voices are neither joyful nor sorrowful. They are focused, professional, and trapped in an endless loop. The lock, according to fragmented regional archives, was built by a guild of engineers known as the Stonebinders. Their purpose was not to keep something out, but to keep something in. The cavern beyond was not a natural formation. It was a vast, perfectly geometric chamber known as a resonance vault. Inside, the mountain's own tectonic hum, a low-frequency vibration, was collected and stabilized. The lock regulated this energy, a geothermal battery for a civilization long since turned to dust. The wall was designed as a monolithic pressure seal. The crack was not a failure. It was the keystone of the entire design. The so-called split stone is a single, precisely calibrated fracture. That chilling air is the vault exhaling its stored energy, slowly and safely, over millennia. The voices are the hardest piece of this puzzle to explain. The prevailing theory among the few scholars who know of the lock is a phenomenon of acoustic imprinting. The intense, focused energy within the vault, combined with the resonant properties of the stone, acted like a recording medium. The final work shift of the stone binders, their shouted instructions and checks as they sealed the door forever, were etched into the very fabric of the place. The cold air flowing through the crack now plays that recording, like a needle on a stone record. To stand before the split stone lock is to feel a profound sense of lonely purpose. You are not witnessing a ruin. You are witnessing a machine that is still, perfectly and silently, doing its job. The civilization it served is gone. Their cities are buried, their names forgotten. Yet their engineering endures, dutifully venting the mountain's breath, whispering its maintenance manual into an empty sky. Whispering its maintenance manual into an empty sky. The work orders echo. Measure twice, cut once. Secure the main gear. Check the pressure gauge. They are a ghost in a machine, a reminder that every structure contains the voices of those who built it. The lock is a memorial not of kings or battles, but of meticulous labor. It is a tomb for engineers, where the only epitaph is a list of specifications murmured on the wind. As the sun dips behind the peaks, the shadow of the cliff deepens, swallowing the lock. The flowing cold air seems to grow stronger, misting in the twilight. The voices become slightly clearer, as if the coming night provides better acoustics. One voice, calmer and older than the others, rises above the rest. It speaks a final phrase that is repeated every evening at this precise moment. The sequence is complete. The lock is set. Good night. Then, silence falls, broken only by the eternal, gentle sigh of cold air from the crack in the stone. The machine rests, holding back the immense, quiet power of the mountain, waiting for a dawn that its builders never saw. It stands as a testament to a world that believed in building things to last, long after the last memory of them has faded from the world. Tucked away on the old Mill Creek waterway, there stands a structure known locally as the Midnight Gate House. It is a small, stone building, its purpose long since rendered obsolete by modern pumping stations. Its twin wooden sluice gates, thick with layers of blackened oak and iron banding, have remained sealed for over half a century. The creek flows quietly past, unaware of the silent vigil the building keeps. But every night, at a time when most of the world is asleep, the gatehouse awakens. The phenomenon is precise, and it is punctual. At exactly midnight, the old mechanisms within the stone house groan to life. Then, slowly, against the weight of years and sediment, the two massive wooden gates creak open. Not wide, just a few inches. Just enough. Water, which had been still and placid, suddenly finds a purpose. It rushes through the narrow opening with a sound that is both fierce and mournful. A roaring whisper that fills the night air. For exactly 1 minute. The cascade continues. A brief, violent torrent in the otherwise sleeping landscape. Then, as the last second of the minute passes, the event concludes with a jarring finality. The sound is sharp, decisive, like a giant's hand clapping once. And then, nothing. Absolute, profound silence settles back over the creek, as if the entire performance was nothing more than a trick of the wind. The first recorded accounts come from railroad workers in the 1950s, men who walked the tracks that run along the creek bank. They reported the strange, timed event, assuming it was some forgotten automatic system. But when municipal engineers investigated, they found the truth to be far more puzzling. The gatehouse was completely disconnected. Its mechanical linkages to the hand crank winches inside were rusted solid. There was no power source, no clockwork timer, no possible explanation for the movement. Attempts to stop it proved equally futile. One year, the water authority welded the gates shut with thick steel plates. That night, at midnight, the sound was different. A horrific metallic shriek tore through the darkness, followed by the distinct sound of shearing metal. The gates opened, the weld snapped clean through, and the water rushed as it always had. The plates were found the next morning, twisted and gleaming at the bottom of the creek. Local historians pieced together the gatehouse's only tragedy. It involved the last keeper, a man named Silas. He was a creature of routine, known for his meticulous nature. His duty was to open the gates at specific times to manage water flow for the downstream mills. His pocket watch, a silver heirloom, was his most cherished possession and the instrument by which he governed the waters. He was never a minute early, never a minute late. On the night the last mill closed for good, Silas was to perform a final, symbolic closing at midnight. But that evening, a group of celebrating workers, leaving the shuttered mill, encountered him on the path. A scuffle broke out, and Silas's prized watch was shattered on the stones. Distraught and disoriented, he stumbled to his post. Without his watch, unable to mark the time, he reportedly fell into the channel when the gates, operated by his assistant from inside the house, opened on schedule. The water took him before the gates slammed closed. The phenomenon began shortly after. Some say it is Silas's eternal routine, a spectral imprint of his obsession with punctuality, playing out forever at the hour of his demise. Others suggest the gatehouse itself remembers its purpose, a haunting of stone and wood and water, unwilling to let its duty die. Scientists have come with vibration sensors and infrared cameras. Their data confirms the impossible. The gates move with immense, unaccountable force precisely at 12 a.m. The temperature in the stone house drops sharply seconds before the event. The sound recordings are clean, devoid of the usual nighttime noises in that single minute of rushing water, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Today, the path to the midnight gatehouse is overgrown, the stone building crumbling at its edges. The stone building crumbling at its edges. The creek still flows. And every night, as the digital clocks of the modern world click to midnight, a more ancient clock keeps time. The crack of old wood echoes. The water rushes with a forgotten urgency. And the boom of the gates shutting resonates like a final, solemn heartbeat. Then, silence returns. Leaving only the mystery and the chilling certainty that tomorrow night, it will all happen again. There is a stretch of the Grand Urban Canal, just south of the old textile district, where the water runs slow and black. The buildings here are tall brick warehouses from another century, their foundations lapped by the sluggish tide. It is a quiet place, especially after dusk, when the city's noise fades to a distant hum. And it is here, on windless nights when the water becomes a perfect obsidian mirror, that the floating room appears. It is not a physical structure. No light shines from the blank brick wall that rises from the opposite bank. The manifestation exists solely within the reflection. If you stand at the correct point on the towpath, you will see it clearly in the dark water. A perfect, inverted image of a room. It appears to be a study or a parlor from the late 19th century. There is a warm, golden glow from an unseen lamp, illuminating rich wood paneling, the corner of a heavy bookshelf, and the delicate curve of an upholstered armchair. It is a scene of profound tranquility and warmth, a pocket of order and comfort suspended in the cold, liquid dark. The image is not static. On some nights, a shadow passes. It is the silhouette of a person, moving slowly across the room as if tending to a task. The figure is never detailed, always a graceful, anonymous shape. There is no sound, only this silent, cinematic play in the water below. The reflection is so convincing, so three-dimensional, that the mind struggles to accept it is not real. The instinct is to look up, to find the source of the light on the blank wall above. But there is only brick and mortar and darkness. The room exists only in its echo. This is where the phenomenon turns from curious to unsettling. The scene is hypnotic, a portal to another time and place. A viewer starts to feel untethered, as if the solid ground beneath them is losing its substance. The viewer's perception of reality begins to unravel, like a thread pulled from a tapestry. Some describe a feeling of profound loneliness, a deep chill that has nothing to do with the night air, as if they are gazing into a warmth they can never touch. Most people break the gaze instinctively, shaken, needing to look away at the real, solid world to regain their balance. Historical research into the Canal Bank reveals a forgotten disaster. In 1898, the grand townhouse of a prominent book publisher and collector, Alastair Gray, stood precisely where the blank wall now is. Gray was a reclusive man, renowned for his vast library and his exquisite taste. One December night, a catastrophic gas leak led to an explosion. The entire west wing of the house, which contained Gray's prized study, collapsed into the canal. The structure was a total loss, and Alastair Gray was never found. The debris was cleared, the canal dredged, and a new, plain warehouse wall was built over the site. The memory of the house, and the man, faded into civic record. Parapsychologists and environmental psychologists have proposed theories. They suggest that the intense, focused energy of a life, particularly one devoted to scholarship and solitary comfort, can sometimes imprint upon a location. The canal water, particularly when still, acts not as a reflector, but as a screen. It projects a residual memory of that space, not as a ghost, but as a persistent afterimage. The room is not haunted. It is remembered, by the place itself. The dizziness experienced by viewers is a point of fascination. Some speculate it is a form of perceptual conflict. The brain receives two irreconcilable pieces of data. The eyes see depth, light, and space in the water. The rational mind knows there is only a flat surface. This clash can induce a kind of sensory nausea. Others wonder if it is more empathetic. To stare into that lost, private world is to briefly touch the edges of a profound solitude. The quiet emptiness of a space that once held a singular consciousness. The disorientation is the mind's recoil from that void. Visitors to the spot now often come in pairs, one to watch the water, the other to watch the watcher. There is an unspoken rule to limit the observation, to step back before the dizziness sets in. It has become a quiet ritual of respect. The floating room does not beckon. It does not invite. It simply is. A piece of a private world, accidentally left behind, viewable only under perfect conditions in an unlikely medium. It speaks to the endurance of memory, not just in minds, but in the very fabric of stone and water. It suggests that some spaces are never truly empty, that they retain the shape of what was lost, waiting for the right moment, and the right mirror, to show it once more. The lesson of the floating room is one of subtle haunting. It is not about fear, but about the melancholy beauty of preservation. It reminds us that a room is more than its walls. It is a vessel for a life. And sometimes, when the world is still and dark enough, that vessel can still be seen, floating in the deep, a ghostly lantern of a past that refuses to be completely extinguished. Offering a silent, dizzying glimpse into a warmth that history swallowed whole. At the very end of the old industrial waterway, where the towpath crumbles into weeds and the last brick archway stands sealed with concrete, there is a final lock. They call it the canal end quarters. The water here is different. It does not flow. It simply waits, a perfect, dark rectangle sunk into the earth, reflecting a narrow slice of the sky. For decades, the story has passed between boaters and urban explorers. They say the loch is a place of unanswered questions. Specifically, it is a place where questions are asked of you. The canal ends here, but something within it still seeks a way forward. The phenomenon is consistent, though rarely witnessed. It occurs on still evenings, when the air is calm and the surface of the water becomes a sheet of black glass. A voice will rise from the deep. It is never a shout, nor a scream. It is a conversational tone, clear and politely confused, as if the speaker has just rounded a corner and found themselves lost. As if the speaker has just rounded a corner and found themselves lost. The question is always the same. Which way to the river? How do I get to the sea? Can you point me toward the open water? The words seem to form from the bubbles that sometimes rise from the silt below. A damp and echoing sound that chills the air around the loch. The words seem to form from the bubbles that sometimes rise from the silt below, a damp and echoing sound that chills the air around the loch. Local historians note that 2 centuries ago, this canal was meant to stretch another 20 miles to meet a major river. The funds ran out. The dream of connection died right here, at this spot. The waterway was abandoned, becoming a stagnant backwater. Some believe that the intent of the canal, its original purpose to link and to flow, imprinted itself upon the place. A longing to complete the journey persists in the stones and the still water. Most who have heard the tale treat it as a ghost story, a fanciful warning to keep away from derelict places after dark. But a few, a scattered handful over the years, have claimed a more direct and terrifying experience. These are the individuals who made the mistake of answering. One account comes from a night watchman from the 60s, patrolling the nearby warehouses. Patrolling the nearby warehouses. He reported hearing the question drift up on a foggy night. Thinking it was a fellow worker, a man who had perhaps fallen in, he leaned over the iron railing and called down into the gloom. He said he pointed south, telling the voice that the river was that way, many miles off. His statement described a sudden, shocking cold, far beyond the chill of the night air. It felt, he said, like 2 rings of ice had clamped around his wrists where he braced on the railing. An impossible force, weighty and pulling, nearly lifted him from his feet. He tore himself back, stumbling onto the path, his wrists marbled with white frostburn that took weeks to fade. Another testimony, from an urban explorer in the early 2000s, echoes this. She had come to photograph the decay. At dusk, she heard it. A soft, male voice, laced with desperation, asking for directions to the sea. She told it the canal was dead, that it went nowhere. The response was not another question. It was the feeling of frozen, skeletal fingers closing over her own as she reached out, foolishly, toward the water's surface. She fled, and later said the cold lingered in her bones for days. The loch itself is nondescript. Green slime coats the stone below the waterline. Moss grows between the cracks of the huge, rotten timber gates that will never open again. There are no dramatic signs, no warnings, save for the modern chain-link fence that now surrounds it. Yet, the story endures because it taps into a profound human metaphor. It is the ghost of a lost path, the echo of an interrupted journey. The voices are not malevolent in a traditional sense. They are trapped, representing a project, a dream, a voyage that was severed before its time. They seek only what the canal was built to seek. A connection. An outlet. A way to continue. The advice from those who know the area is simple, and given with serious faces. If you ever find yourself at the canal end quarters as day fades, and you hear that polite, damp query rise from the still water, do not engage. Do not point the way. Do not offer comfort. To acknowledge the question is to become a part of its unresolved journey. Your hand becomes the signpost, your arm the direction arrow, and the icy grip is the price for providing an answer that can never truly be fulfilled. The lock sits, a silent full stop at the end of a sentence of water. It holds within it a deep, patient frustration. On quiet nights, it still asks its question of the empty air, waiting for someone to finally show it the way home. The potential for that chilling, grasping response remains. A permanent fixture in the folklore of the city. A reminder that some places hold on to their purpose long after the world has decided it is over. The story of the Gratham Point Light begins as so many do, with a steadfast promise against the fury of the sea. It was built in 1887 on a treacherous, wind-lashed promontory. Its first keeper, a taciturn and disciplined man named Silas Rourke, served for 40 years. He kept the great lamp burning through storms that shook the very foundations. And his logbooks were models of concise, factual reporting. Everything changed the winter of 1927. A ferocious nor'easter slammed the coast, a storm of legendary proportions. For 3 days, the world was reduced to howling wind and horizontal sleet. And then, on the 4th morning, an unnatural silence fell. The supply tender that arrived a week later found the light extinguished. They found the main door swinging wildly on its hinges. They found cold porridge still in a bowl on the kitchen table. But they did not find Silas Rourke. The official report concluded he was swept away while securing equipment on the gallery. A replacement was assigned. This new keeper lasted 2 weeks. He reported hearing footsteps in the tower when he knew he was alone. He said his tools were moved during the night. The final straw was the chair. He requested an immediate transfer, muttering about an atmosphere he could not abide. The next keeper saw it through a full year. His log entries grew increasingly sparse. Then strangely personal. He wrote of feeling watched. Of a comforting presence during a lonely Christmas gale. He noted, on several occasions, that the final, interior lock on the heavy oak door to the lantern room would be fastened from the inside after he had descended for the night. He retired, citing age. And spoke little of his time at Gratham Point. Over the decades, the pattern held. Some keepers fled in weeks. Others stayed for years, speaking of a silent partner in their duties. Malfunctions common to other stations, like fogged lenses or seized clockwork, simply never occurred at Gratham Point. It was as if the machinery was maintained by an unseen hand. Automation came to the coastline in the 1970s. One by one, the lights were demanned, their keepers reassigned, their living quarters sealed. Their report was cryptic, citing persistent anomalies in the automated systems that defied explanation. The light required a permanent, on-site custodian. So the position was created. Not a keeper, but a caretaker. A guardian for a guardian. The job posting was unusual. A tolerance for profound isolation. And a respect for the history of the place. It paid well, but attracted few. Those who took it were a special kind of person, quiet, observant, and deeply intuitive. The current caretaker, Eleanor Vance, has been here for a decade. She maintains the modern equipment, gives rare tours to historians, and keeps a daily journal. In the evenings, she often sits in the parlor with a book. She is never truly alone. There is the consistent sound of footsteps moving upstairs, a measured pace across the floorboards of the empty watch room. It is not a threatening sound. It is the sound of patrol. At sunset, Eleanor makes her rounds. She checks the solar panels. The radio beacon. And finally, the historic lantern room itself. Now housing a silent, museum piece Fresnel lens. She descends the iron spiral staircase. Her own footsteps echoing. She does not lock the door behind her. She never has. Yet, every morning when she ascends, she finds it is. The final, heavy brass lock on the lantern room door is always engaged from the inside. It is a physical impossibility, a fact she accepts with a quiet nod. She simply unlocks it with her own key and proceeds with her day. Visitors sometimes feel it, a peculiar density to the air in the tower. They report a sudden chill near the base of the stairs. Or the faint scent of pipe tobacco and machine oil. Where neither exists. And many have seen, or claimed to see. A shadow against the far wall of the watch room, a silhouette that is not their own. Looking out to sea. The most profound evidence is in the silence. During a catastrophic power failure that blacked out the entire region. When every other automated light went dark. Gratham Point alone remained lit. The official record lists it as a bizarre electrical surge. Eleanor knows differently. She watched from the cottage as the beam cut through the storm. Just as it had for Silas Rourke. So the light remains. A sentinel on the point, its beam sweeping the dark water in a perfect, relentless circle. It is maintained by modern technology, and by something else. Something that polishes the brass when no one is looking. Something that ensures the light never fails. Something that rocks slowly in the chair by the watchroom window, forever gazing at the horizon it was sworn to protect. The door is locked from the inside. The footsteps walk their eternal watch. And the keeper, as he promised, never truly left his post. Thank you, my dear friend, for drifting along these haunted canal lock quarters with me tonight. These waterways once carried life and industry. But they also carried loss, fear, and countless final moments. The lock keepers gave their lives to the canals. And some never truly left their posts. If you ever find yourself walking beside a quiet canal in Illinois after dark, remember these stories. Do not linger too long near the water. Do not answer voices you cannot see. And never follow ripples that move on their own. The canals are patient. They remember every name ever spoken beside them. Rest well tonight. And until our next journey into the shadows, listen carefully. Because the water is always listening too.